Jerry DeWitt discusses the contradiction of America's religious evangelical right and their obsession with Donald Trump on the Right to Reason podcast.
We are now, regardless of what we see on the news or on social media, we are now more civilized than we've ever been. So we can get better. But we won't get better by simply trying to generalize from whence the issue originates. By simply saying, well, it's a church thing, it's a state thing, it's a religious thing, it's a governmental thing, it's a people thing. It's a human thing. And that's the part of us that does change, but it changes very, very, very slowly. So it's going to demand a great deal of patience for all of us, because we're going to see very, very small changes within our lifetimes. But that doesn't mean that our energies are in vain. And it doesn't mean that our lives dedicated to activism is not worthwhile. It is worthwhile, even if the changes we see are small in the present tense.
You know, right when you said it's just people, I actually just closed my eyes. Like, that hit me, man. That really hit me. And it's almost like you used to do this for a living, affecting people's emotions. But I'm just damn glad that you're on our side, because you would be a devastating enemy on the other side.
Well, if you're going to let me preach, then let me have the altar call. All right. That may have sounded like the altar call, but that wasn't the altar call, because this is where I want to call people to action. And it may be something you never heard before, and it's what I said a couple of minutes ago that I've never talked about in regards to America. The only reason that we're actually in the middle of this culture war the way that we are is because these worshipers of Amerigod, and there are a lot of them. It looks like, as far as the evangelicals are concerned, it's about half of the country. The reason that this is still a battle that's going forward, and one that's not won or completely polarized beyond repair, is because at this point in time, the worshipers of Amerigod, many of the worshipers of Amerigod, are actually trapped in idolatry, because they still remember the old God. They do remember. That's why it's hard for them to answer. They may still, in many cases, fall on Trump's side and excuse him for his behaviors, but you can see it in their eyes. You can hear it in how they answer the question about Trump's behavior. They still do have a certain heart for the old God that did at least have a better standard for living, a more humanistic standard. And so they're trapped in idolatry. At one moment, their pastor will preach a message that is a direct reflection of the old gods. And then, unfortunately, at the next moment, he may spin that message around for a political motivation and preach an Amerigod message. But both messages are being heard right now at the same time. So what we need to do, or at least maybe very particular members of your audience may be motivated to do, we need to call Christianity in particular out on its idolatry. Because right now, if we could just get them to step back to a more compassionate, a more humanistic stance than what they have now, that in itself would be progress. If we could remind them of the days when they were the anti-slavery voice. If we could remind them of the days when many of them, not all, obviously, this has been something that's been going on in our country for a very long time. Amerigod has just evolved to this point now. But that where they stood for women's rights, where they stood for charity, where they themselves, if we could call them out on their idolatry and remind them that there was a time in American history when they themselves were the welfare system. They were the ones that the poor and the downtrodden could depend upon, then maybe we could burn the brush arbors of America down completely before it's too late.
I remember in your talk that you had referenced that there was no place in the inn for Mary when she was pregnant with allegedly Christ, and how that was analogous to the actual opposite of our refugee policy happening in America right now. And then another point you said that the story of the Good Samaritan completely destroys the racism that's just running rampant through our country right now, saying that this person was different. And the message of that story, that biblical message, that while obviously we know the Bible isn't true intrinsically, but it can still have some valuable messages to it, especially in parables and that sort of thing. And in that message, the whole idea was that one person didn't keep walking. One person said, I don't care about our differences. I'm still going to help that person. That hit me, man. Find this episode and many more at therighttoreason.com.
Heaven sent my residence, it's evident, just visiting, blending in the hiding light, shining it.